Hello everybody, welcome to Stonx Music. My name's Ollie and today we're going to be having a look at Phaser in this deep dive episode. Let's go! Right, so here we are back in the Ableton Manual. Let's jump straight into it. Note the Phaser effect is not available in the Lite edition. Phaser uses a series of all-pass filters to create a phase shift in the frequency spectrum of a sound. The pole controls creates notches in the frequency spectrum. The feedback control can then be used to invert the waveform and convert these notches into peaks or poles. Filter cutoff frequency is changed with the frequency control, which can be adjusted in tandem with feedback using the Effects XY controller. The device has two modes, space and earth, for changing the spacing of notches along the spectrum, and hence the colour of the sound. This effect can further be adjusted with the colour control. Periodic control of the filter frequency is possible using the envelope section. You can increase or decrease the envelope amount or invert its shape with negative values, and then use the attack and release controls to define envelope shapes. Phaser contains two LFOs to modulate filter frequency for the left and right stereo channels. The LFOs have 6 possible waveform shapes: sine, square, triangle, sawtooth up, sawtooth down and random. The extent of the LFO influence on the filter frequency is set with the amount control. LFO speed is controlled with the rate control, which can be set in terms of hertz. Rate can also be synced to the song tempo and set in meter subdivisions, for example 16th notes. The phase control lends the sound stereo movement by setting the LFOs to run at the same frequency, but offsetting their waveforms relative to each other. Set this to 180 and the LFOs will be perfectly out of phase, 180 degrees apart, so that when one reaches its peak, the other is at its minimum. Spin detunes the two LFO speeds relative to each other. Each filter frequency is then modulated using a different LFO frequency, as determined by the spin amount. The dry-wet control adjusts the balance between the processed and dry signals. Set it to 100% if using Phaser in a return track. Cool, so that's it for the Phaser. Let's jump into Ableton and see what we can do with it. Right, here we are back in Ableton. Now, if you've seen any of my other episodes, pretty much all of them I'm making big old nasty basses. So I've just done the same here as every other episode. I've started with a sine wave, done a little bit of FM into it by the end of it, overdrive, amp, auto filter with the LFO for some movement, overdrive again, LFO for movement on the overdrive frequency and amount, another auto filter to do a bit more movement, another LFO for that movement, about 9 OTTs, and then a multiband at the end just to kind of tame those harsh frequencies. So that's got us, let me group it all. Our initial sound is this, and that's got us this. Right, so let's grab our phaser on and let's just have a listen to what it does. So, with it off, with it on. So you can hear when you're moving that around, that's changing the poles at which the phasing is occurring. And it's given us quite a lot of movement. So let's grab, span, that's the easiest way to grab it from here, and have a little look at what it's actually doing. Alright, so we'll turn it off. Let's turn it on. So you can see here our correlation meter is slamming right the way to the right. It's not creating any phasing issues, like the flanger. You could see that actually moving the correlation meter. But the phaser, you can definitely see the frequencies which are being phased in and out. So one of the ways I like to work with this is either find a spot that's quite nice, maybe somewhere there, and we'll work with the envelope. And maybe the LFO as well, and we'll have that on a slow rate. You can can see once you introduce the LFO, you start to get a little bit more of this phase movement between left and right. So if I was doing this, I would most likely group it, have another one which would be our dry, and this one would be the wet, and then grab a auto filter or multiband, depending how you want to do it, and cut out a few of those low frequencies. Let's set that to 200 in the phased one. So we have our phased version here. And our dry version. So that's giving us some nice width in the bass, but making sure that our correlation meter is slamming it straight to mono. It's still nicely in the middle for our thick bass sounds. So that's a great one to add to your big basses to give it a bit more of that movement. The other thing we could do is grab an LFO and move that around, say the frequency or the feedback. Let's go, that's probably going to be a bit much. Don't want too much. And this is essentially the same as what that envelope is doing. It's giving us kind of some more movement to it. Slow that down a bit. Then back in with our dry. So it's just adding a bit more width and thickening up that big old bass line. So that's a fun one to do with phaser. The other thing I like to do is put it on my drums. And I think we looked at this in the flanger video as well. It's a really nice effect. Let's come into samples, and I know I can use these ones. Let's grab that, that's quite nice. Let's duplicate that a few times. Control L for looping, and let's grab our phaser. So grab our phaser on, and then we can turn it to space mode, which is going to give us a bit more, I don't know, I just find this one's, it's got weirder frequencies to it. Let's have a listen, move this around. So that sounds more like it's going through the corpus or something. There's like this resonator sound to it. So just using it as simple as something like that. Show automation. Bring that up, and let's bring one before and one after, and then we can either use the dry wet or turning it on and off. Let's have it turn on there, turn off again here, and it's just going to act as like a little transition. Just a nice way to kind of give a little bit of change and transition to your drums. So if we move this here, it's a kind of only a little 4-bar break. You kind of get this kind of. You could even do it on that last little one there. Come in to that frequency, just kind of go just like this. And again, it would be normal. And if you wanted to have that going off into a return track, you could have a echo or something and kind of throw that phased sound into the echo and have that roll in over the next thing. It's just a nice one to give you some more sounds to play with out of a limited range of your initial sounds, rather than always looking for impacts or other kind of things. I really prefer to make sounds out of what I've got. So let's just have a listen here, and we'll have that show automation to the send, have that sending up to there and cut off here. Send that's like a 95. You might want to do it again there. So it's just sending it off when it's making those cool sounds. Sending that across to this echo. And just kind of giving you more movement over what was essentially just a static drum break being repeated. So using it to thicken your basses, using it to kind of give some augmentation to your drums. You could also do this on the whole track if you had a group. Let's imagine we've got this bit here. I'm just going to record that bass line. I love all those broken bits. You might want to bounce this down to audio and cut them out, or put a gate on that if you didn't like them. You could group these two and then put the phaser on both of them and kind of do the same thing. You'd use it, let's find somewhere. Do the same thing on the space mode, frequency up there, show automation, and just towards the end, kind of bring it up somewhat. And again, we could either do this with the dry wet, have that as 0, or automate the actual on off. So we've got maybe you want that to kind of come back down at the end there. Come on. Up to there, filter that one down, duplicate the lot. So we got this kind of, and then we're going to want to automate the dry wet back down to 0. That's like it. Love all those broken noises. So yeah, basically phaser, thickening basses, adding some kind of interesting movement to your drums or onto an entire group if you want to kind of make it a an effect like on your DJ console. It's the kind of thing you'd have on there, and you kind of, it's kind of a filter plus some pitch stuff, resonator. It's kind of all of that mixed into one, and also just good for widening these bass sounds and any other things like that. You use it on your pads if you want to widen some pads up. Kind of little plonky sounds. It can add some nice kind of, with a slow rate and nice movement over time, or just giving a bit more wobble and movement. Alright everyone, that'll do it for this deep dive episode. Hopefully you learned a thing or two about phaser. As always, project files are available down there in the description, so get your hands on those basses if you want to use them in any of your tracks. Feel free. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more of these videos, and I'll catch up with you guys next time. Bye!